Welcome to the Oral Apothecary Podcast, authentic chat about medicines, pharmacy and healthcare in the UK.
Pharmacists Jamie, Gimmo and STC take on topical and controversial stories, but keep it edgy yet light-hearted.
Pod guests share their desert island drugs, a career anthem and joyful patient stories. Welcome to the Oral Apothecary Podcast. My name is Jamie Hayes. Coming up in today's episode, we're joined by Tracy Brown. Tracy is an award-winning pharmacist from Glasgow. We will welcome Tracy in a moment as she shares her desert island drug, her career anthem, and recommends a book for the Oral Apothecary Library. Our micro discussion this week looks at how we go about improving opioid prescribing in primary care, in particular in chronic non-cancer pain. First, let me welcome my two fellow apothecaries. STC is in Bournemouth and Gimmo is in Cardiff. Before I go to them, look, I've been practicing. Which one of these is better? Ladies and gentlemen, please give a generous welcome to the Oral Apothecary Live. Or, how does this one sound?
Ladies and gentlemen, may we please ask that you take your seats, as today's event will begin shortly.
So, we'll be doing our first live show on February the 19th, folks. We would love to see you there. Gimmo, what do you think?
Sounds good. I think we've got a bit of work to do, is my honest assessment. So we spent the last couple of weeks umming and ahhing about whether to go ahead, haven't we, with the live show, because it looked like it might have been off because of COVID. It's back on. So we found a venue, Milk and Sugar in Cardiff. So it's in Central Square in Cardiff on the 19th of February.
So let me stop you there, just for our overseas audience. Milk and Sugar is take a quick left out of Cardiff Central train station and you'll find it.
Is that where Greg's used to be on Wood Street?
That's a right.
So it's we'll put the booking link up on the show notes and we'll probably be talking about nothing else on Twitter for the next couple of months, but that's exciting. And also, remember Amira from episode 3? I was up last week in Swansea University doing a session with the new School of Pharmacy students, so it's their first intake, I think. And so I spent a bit of time with them talking about quality improvement and medicine safety and stuff. So that was good. How about you, Steve? What are you up to?
So shall we just explain what the format of the live event's going to be and how we're going to take a slightly different tack or not?
Well, I think that by the time this episode goes out, it'll be a sellout anyway.
Oh, right. Okay. I like your thinking there. So if that doesn't happen.
But go on, if there's a few tickets remaining.
We've started to try and take different angles. You might have realised that where we had the medical lawyer on last week. And so we've decided for a long time that we needed to think about the patient angle in relation to medicines. So we have somebody who we know who has unfortunately had quite a lot of care from the NHS recently, some of it for quite serious conditions. And he wants to come and talk about his experiences of having NHS care, some of which included medicines, much of it did. But he also has a very interesting angle because he's an architect. And so he does work looking at how buildings are designed within the NHS. So he's got some really good insights, having spent a lot of time tucked away in hospitals on his own. We think it's going to be a fascinating angle, and we might get further into that, taking patient views about medicines and healthcare generally.
And we will record it as well. So if people can't make it,
will we?
We'll put it out as a podcast.
Yeah, we will try.
We're going to try.
Oh, I thought I was going to be able to be unedited and be able to say what I like.
Live and unleashed, yeah.
Well, listen, I've had a very positive week because of all the news about the Science Festival, as you know, on WhatsApp. I've been super excited about all of that. And then myself and my wife and my daughter, we bought a new flat this week for my daughter, so that's very exciting. And today I think I had one of the nicest compliments I've had since I started working in general practice, so I felt very positive about that. It was a very complex patient. It was a telephone call, actually, a very complex patient with complex physical and mental health, actually. And we had a long discussion and I did a lot of listening, you'll be pleased to know. And, we ended up with talking about all sorts of things, whether it be about medicines, about weight, exercise, CBT, coaching, the need for bloods. And at the end, the patient just said to me, "Oh, this has been I wasn't expecting this at all. What you've said and what you're so wise. You're like Obi-Wan Kenobi." And I love Star Wars, who doesn't? And I thought, wow, that's a nice compliment, isn't it? So that is a really nice end towards the week. Unfortunately, I was then cycling home about an hour ago, and I've only just calmed down, if I'm honest, because I was listening to a podcast, and it was the DTB podcast. And all right, I'm going to be honest, it's not my favourite, but it is informative. And all I'm going to say is that they were discussing about the new overprescribing report, the Department of Health one in England, and the new National Clinical Director. By the time this podcast goes out, that person should have been announced. And rightly so, they were saying...
Can I stop you midway through? Don't be mean about the DTB.
I'm not being mean.
Okay, good.
I just said it's not my favourite, but it's informative. I listen to it every month. But they were discussing the report, and they rightly point out, where's the evidence for saying that 10% of items are overprescribed? And they've always been evidence-based and independent, and I love the DTB for that. But they then went on to say, and I suppose I'm just saying that maybe we've still got work to do, those of us that are working as clinical pharmacists in general practice, because the editor-in-chief, who is a GP, said he had slight concerns about how it was all going to be implemented because, of course, pharmacists are very drug-focused and they may not be best placed to offer patients the alternative advice about non-therapeutic options and consider what's best for patients. And I just exploded when I was cycling home. And I've reflected on it, and he did say slight concerns. And maybe pharmacists do sometimes get drug-focused, but for anybody listening who does that kind of role, we all need to wake up and make sure that people realise that we do listen to people's concerns and we educated as anybody to be able to offer non-therapeutic options, because that is what holistic care is about. And I think today's guest is going to tell us all about that.
Very good. Okay, before we welcome today's guest, look, we had an email. Just a quick email to say I absolutely love your podcast. I stumbled across it by mistake when looking for shared care decision-making articles, and I was so taken with it I've started listening from the very beginning. Playing catch-up now and loving the stories, articles with witty pharmacy humour. It's not a pharmacy podcast. So keep up the fantastic work and Happy New Year to you all. So that was from Alan Hopkins. Alan Hopkins, Senior Pharmacy Technician in Sussex. So thank you, Alan. We need it. Okay, it's my great pleasure to welcome Tracy Brown to the Oral Apothecary. Tracy moved from community pharmacy to primary care 17 years ago. She ran a benzodiazepine step-down clinic for several years. In 2016, Tracy started a pain clinic in one of the GP practices in Glasgow. In 2020, Tracy applied for Scottish Government funding to expand her pain clinic to cover 3 additional GP practices. She now runs the Pain, Teach and Treat programme and is a member of the Scottish Pain Pharmacist Network. In 2021, Tracy and her chronic pain team won the Prescrip Award in addressing overprescribing as part of her chronic pain clinic. Her work was also voted as a Silver Award at the Prescrip annual event. All very impressive. Tracy, welcome to the podcast. What's on your agenda? What's on your mind?
Thank you very much for inviting me. Really on my agenda at the moment is trying to improve the public awareness of chronic pain and how best to manage it, and also in conjunction with that trying to improve the way that health professionals deal with chronic pain and trying to educate and help people understand more about self-management for chronic pain.
Thanks, Tracy. And so we met Tracy through the Prescrip Awards. That was 6 months ago. It was great to hear your story. Tell us a bit more about the work that you do then in Glasgow.
So in November 2020, I applied for funding through the Modernising Patient Pathway programme, and really everything kind of exploded from there. I've been a lot more involved in pain management things than I ever have been before. As you said about the Scottish Pain Pharmacist Network, that's recently just been set up, so I'm now a member of that. The Modernising Patient Pathways programme has got a lot of projects going on throughout Scotland at the moment, and there's been a lot of networking and a lot of learning from one another, so there's a lot of good work going on throughout Scotland. What I personally do at the moment is I run a pain clinic in 3 GP practices. Most of it's actually been run from home during the pandemic and using telephone consultations, and it's really worked out quite surprisingly well. I was a bit worried about it at first, how that would work, but patients have really taken to it. And I think with chronic pain patients, it's really quite difficult for a lot of patients in chronic pain to actually get to GP practices. A lot of the time, it takes a while for them to get up and get ready in the morning, and then the thought of having public transport, getting to a clinic. So I used to have quite a high DNA rate, but the telephone consultations has actually worked really well.
Can you look at DNAs or attendance before pandemic and after and actually see a difference?
I haven't actually measured that, but because I really can just phone a patient at any time during the day, and most of the time during the pandemic it was actually easy to get people in. So so I haven't actually measured it, but I haven't had a lot of problems with not being able to contact patients at all.
So Tracy, I've got my notes from when we first met in probably September last year, and I've got a couple of quotes to read back to you, see if you remember these. Before Tracy and the clinic came into my life, I was giving up and had no hope. Maybe going as far to say Tracy actually saved me that day. That's a stunning quote to receive from your work. Tell us a bit more about that.
Actually, that patient that said that came along last week to record a patient story for me, and it's going to get presented to the Glasgow Health Board. And so it was quite interesting. We went along and she got video telling her story about her. So I said a little bit about the pain clinic, and she told us a lot about how the pain clinic could change the life for her. So basically, she was a patient who was in a lot of distress and a lot of pain. She's only young. She's got a young daughter, and she was just crying with pain all the time. She didn't know what was wrong with her. She was looking for investigations to find out what was wrong, but all the investigations were coming back clear. So she was really quite confused, and she came along, well, basically I phoned her, and she said that day was the day that things started to change, and it was really just because I took the time to explain to her what chronic pain was, and that the level of pain didn't necessarily mean that was a significant tissue damage, and that chronic pain was a condition in itself, and really just signposted her to quite a lot of education on chronic pain. She found the Flipping Pain website really useful, and she looked at a lot of that stuff, and really it was just building trust with her and just trying to help her know that I was there and I was going to help her in any way I could. And we just set goals and we worked on self-management techniques. And week after week, every time I spoke to her, she was starting to realise that the medication wasn't the answer, because at the start, that was really what she was looking for. She wanted fixed. She wanted medication to fix her. But as time went on and she understood more about chronic pain and about self-managing it, she realised that the pain medication was actually not working, and it was giving her more side effects than anything. So now she lives her life. She said that she's got her smile back in her face. Her daughter realises the difference that has been made to her, and she's living a fuller life. But she's still got pain, but she just manages it better.
So Jamie, we were at, I'll probably say 2 years ago, and it probably will be about 5-6 years ago, but it was at the All Wales Medicine Strategy Group Best Practice event a few years ago, and there was a very, very similar story, wasn't there? It was I can't remember the clinicians involved. I'm sorry, I think it was a pharmacist and a consultant.
It was Sue Jeffs was the consultant. I remember Sue being on stage. Yep.
Yeah, and there was a pharmacist as well. And apologies to her if she's listening, I can't remember her name, but it was a very similar story, and I've heard that story since told by other people involved in pain management clinics. It seems to be an area where, as a result of something earlier on in the system where people have been given the medication and then coming off the medication, it's making a massive difference to people's lives. And that must be very rewarding, but it also highlights an issue in the system, doesn't it, that is probably not being addressed elsewhere.
Listeners shouldn't adjust their headphones at this point. STC is on the call, and he's about to speak now.
I thought I'd said enough earlier, but look, I was really moved by what Tracy said when she won the award at Prescript, and it chimes though, doesn't it? And like you've just said, Paul, Tracy, I don't know if you've got any advice for anybody who's working out there, because that is the most difficult bit, isn't it? Yes, you need trust to have those conversations, but as you said, it's about patients, people understanding that I talk to people and say, I know what you want and I'd love to be able to give you, and it's what I call light switch therapy, where I flick the switch and the pain goes. But I can't provide that for you because it doesn't exist. And it's that kind of understanding, isn't it? So that they realise that, as you said, they've got to learn to live with it. But a bit like the point about the medicines at the beginning, and we need to look for alternative therapies, is people have turned to them because there haven't been the access to alternative therapies. Now, this is a good point that the DTB made, which is we underinvest, and that's what GPs always say to me, but what can I prescribe? Because I can't prescribe opiates, I can't prescribe non-steroidals in this type of person, but the pain services available to me are not good enough, or they're not extensive enough or accessible enough to deal with this people like the person you've just described, who we've all got tens of, and so we haven't invested, have we? The system hasn't invested enough in pain. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I feel it's starting to get better with campaigns like, the Flipping Pain campaign and the Living Well with Pain website and things. I think there is a lot more information out there for patients. But also what I'm lucky enough to have in my practice is